In the Soviet Union, soldiers were subjected to all sorts of experiments. From the incredible biobot to the flying tank, I've compiled the most insane projects that emerged from the minds of great engineers, some of which even underwent real testing. How about a radio to control the thoughts of enemy soldiers? And at the end, I'll tell you about the biosuit, where a soldier's head could survive even without the rest of the body. In 1941, Oleg Antonov, the chief engineer of the glider management, was tasked with a task worthy of science fiction to create a flying Soviet tank. We've already seen engineers attempt to create super soldiers, underground tanks, and even use pigeons as combat agents, but Antonov's task was something special. Imagine this: a T-60 tank mounted on the chassis of an ordinary biplane to give it the ability to fly. That's the kind of modification you see in computer games nowadays. The idea was that the tank could be towed in the air to its destination, and then glide to the landing site, like a multi-ton glider on the battlefield. After landing, the tank would drop its wings and engage in combat. However, as is often the case with such crazy and straightforward ideas, the experiment with the flying tank failed. The TB-3 bomber, used for transportation, couldn't handle the weight of the armored vehicle. And although the tank landed successfully, the project was deemed unsuccessful because it couldn't be transported. Heavy aircraft loaded with the single tank became too slow and vulnerable to attack, and the feasibility of delivering just one tank with such risks simply didn't justify it. As you can understand, the project was shelved after several tests and never returned. And here, our story of secret and ambitious Soviet projects reaches a new grand chapter: attempts to create their own Hadron Collider in the USSR. Imagine this. In 1983, construction begins on the Proton Research Institute in the city of Protvino, where it was planned to build a collider with a total length of over 21 kilometers. This was not just an ambitious project, it was a dream to possess one of the most powerful accelerators in the world, giving scientists unprecedented opportunities to study elementary particles. But there were problems. Work progressed slowly, and only 1.5 kilometers of tunnels were built over several years. However, in 1987, activation time came, and the government decided to accelerate the process. In 1988, the Soviet Union, for the first time since 1935, purchased modern tunneling complexes from the Lovett Company abroad, which was supposed to significantly speed up the construction of such a secretive object. But then came the restructuring. Funding was abruptly cut off. The collider remained unfinished, a giant, forgotten, and abandoned. Equipment that was supposed to be part of a scientific breakthrough was looted, and the space around it turned into warehouses, like much of that period. These were billions in today's money, not to mention the ambition and importance of this project. But alas, Yuri, we lost it all. Now, let's move on to the next insane project, Omega. Here's the deal. As part of the Omega program, engineers were developing a system capable not only of detecting targets, but also identifying their vulnerable points using ruby lasers and neodymium glass lasers. The project was led by E.M. Sakharov, who conducted initial tests of the laser location of aerodynamic objects. However, like many stories of grand projects, Omega faced its own obstacles. After initial research, it became clear that the task set were impossible to fully accomplish, and the project had to be suspended. Then came a new stage, the creation of the 73T6 Omega-2M complex, using a carbon dioxide laser and the TV system TOV, Karach-2. The next breakthrough occurred in 1982, when a radio-controlled target was successfully hit by laser radiation during tests. It was a true moment of triumph, confirmed during subsequent tests and demonstrated to the top leadership. Ultimately, the decision was made to create a mobile version of the laser complex, the 74T6. While this complex demonstrated the ability to hit targets, it couldn't surpass existing anti-aircraft missile systems in technical characteristics. It turned out that although everything worked and targets were shot down, The laser was heavily dependent on weather conditions and couldn't maintain constant readiness. It needed to be backed up by conventional SAM systems, which was absurd in itself. Therefore, the project was almost completely shelved, taking only the developments in target tracking and detection, which are used in modern complexes. And it's time to talk about what many of you have been waiting for: Soviet Biorobots, which were actually developed during the Cold War. Imagine this. Scientists, inspired by advances in transplantology, began working on a project that could revolutionize the understanding of war and human nature. The idea of a biorobot partially emerged from the experiments of surgeon Vladimir Demikin, who conducted experiments on head transplantation. The Ashil Lebedev's life support apparatus was supposed to be a key element of this project. This device essentially consisted of a spacesuit for a severed head, allowing it to function without a body. The head in the suit could perform the functions of a pilot, obeying simple commands. It's like a chapter from a Philip K. Dick book. Photos confirming the creation of such a spacesuit add even more mystique and horror to this story. However, the final results of this project remain unknown. The project was closed a few years after research began, and it seems that no positive results were achieved. Although, who knows? It seems to me that even if the project were successful, ordinary people wouldn't rush to talk about it. After all, these were military developments, and such trump cards were not meant to be revealed. Lastly, I decided to share a strange German tank prototype that surprised all countries. Just look at it. An armored sphere that looks more like an alien spaceship than a traditional military vehicle. With its smooth, welded body, 5 mm thick, and a central cylinder supported by rotating hemispheres as wheels. Now, it looks like a droid from Star Wars. Inside this armored sphere was a space for the driver, who sat on a stool and observed the world through a narrow slit at eye level. The speed of the Kugelpanzer left much to be desired, and on rough terrain, it risked tipping over. Without weapons included, it was assumed that the driver could use the MG-42 infantry machine gun for self-defense. So, it was such a unique vehicle. Ideally, there should have been hundreds on the battlefield to maneuver conveniently and knock out enemy strongholds. It's not surprising that the documents and markings of the device, which ended up in Japan, have not been preserved. But many data suggest that it was manufactured at the Krupp concern's factories back in the 1930s, and then all documents were simply classified. That's all, folks. Subscribe to my Cucumber channel. I'd really appreciate your like and look forward to your comments. Thank you and see you soon.